Hi guys, welcome to this video. Today we're going to go through more psychic insight on mirrors, anchors, souls, divine intervention, and more. My name is Laura. Welcome to my channel. I'm the founder of Pleiadian Healer and Shamanic Self. You can find me at pleiadianhealer.com. So let's just get into the topics for today. I have created a playlist, Psychic Insight. You can find it either below. I'll probably link it below. And then also when you just go to the playlist section of my channel. In addition, you can view new to this channel. It's going to go through a whole lot of concepts, especially for people who are new. Now we're going to dig through the topics. So these are topics that came up on my Patreon, and this is already a few months ago. So I made a list of things I want to talk about and my answers to it. These are my own intuitive psychic insight, in addition to getting yes and no answers with the help of tarot and oracle cards. And if you use them without calling out any entities or spirit misguides, they can actually be quite helpful. If you want to learn how to use tarot cards like a pro, you can take my course, Learn Tarot Like a Pro. Okay, now let's get into it. So there was a question about mirrors. Someone asked, do we have so what we see in the mirror, is that really a reflection? Do we have reflections, or is it something else that looks like it's copying us? So what I got is, so kind of, I guess the question was, when we look inside the mirror, is it really us, or is it like this entity pretending it is us? Now, mirrors, I do want to remind you, mirrors are portals, similar to screens and cell phone screens. When they look black, it's basically a black mirror. Okay. So mirrors symbolize reflection. What you're seeing reflected back onto you, perhaps sometimes you don't like. And this especially goes for people, if you've ever been at a stage in your life, for example, as a teenager, young adult, and I know I've been at that stage as a young adult where I was looking at myself in the mirror. This was when I was around 20 years old. I had gotten out of this really abusive relationship, and the guy had basically wrecked my entire appearance of what I look. He basically had wrecked my entire self-confidence and what I look like. And when you have to rise like a phoenix from these experiences, it makes you so, so strong. But you really have to go through all of that and dig through all of it in order to help other people too. So I know I went through a part in my life where I was looking inside, like into a mirror, and I wouldn't even really recognize myself anymore. That's how bad it was. I was like, I don't even know who this person is looking back at me. I don't recognize the hair color, because that was a time in my life where I was changing hair colors. I was changing from brunette, which is my natural color, to red, and then blonde, like full on blonde, not like the blonde tips that I have here. So I had like 4 or 5 different haircuts. I had like dark chocolate black or something in between too. So I went through these really extreme changes. It completely ruined my hair, by the way, to a point where I actually had to chop my hair off into this bob-like thing. And I felt that was pure freedom after 2 years of hair experimentation too. But I do like my hair longer way better. I think it also has to do with hair carrying energy, and being someone who had a lot of past lives as a Native American, especially Navajo American. I know that for the Navajo specifically, hair has to do with honor too. So there's something with hair. I know it's not necessarily related to mirror, but it all ties into one. And so I was looking into the mirror and I hated myself, basically. I was like so separated from my own soul. I had dreams about where I went looking for my old self, like the year before I entered that relationship. So there's something to a mirror where when you're at a stage in your life and you don't like seeing what's reflected back onto you, perhaps you're not going to like your mirror image. And I feel that's especially true for younger people, like teenagers who are going through these huge changes in self-esteem and just in their body in general, possibly children, and possibly just also maybe aging people. Like all of a sudden you wake up, you're like, oh, I'm not 30 anymore, I'm like 50, 60, 70. I don't recognize myself anymore. Like I don't know how that is. I'm not at that age yet, so I wouldn't know. but maybe someone can confirm that. But I know I've been at that point in my life. I don't have any issues on confessing to that either, because I think whatever doesn't break us, or whatever did break us, really does make us stronger to a certain degree. If we rise from that and become the person we are now, and we accept our past, it makes us really strong. And I feel that's really what those experiences taught me too. And I might want to discuss those in different videos, because it really has to do, I really felt this person was very reptilian, by the way, who did that to me. There was definitely some karmic element to it, but I really felt, you know, when you're talking about people trying to sever the heart-to-heart connection between people, this was a person who was trying to do that within my own self somehow. And this was also a person who had plastic surgery done on himself. So it was a guy, and who had basically just demanded from everyone he was in a relationship with that they basically change their outer appearance and everything. So there are people like that out there. And I'm sure there are people watching this channel who are maybe under the influence of that, or who've gone through that too. But back to the entire mirror thing, mirrors can also be a symbol for relationships. Mirrors are created from glass mostly. So there are some mirrors out there that are created from different substances, but in the traditional way, they are created by a glass technique. There's a special technique on how to create them, and it's actually a craft. The mirror craft is becoming forgotten. For some people, it's something that's copying us, but it's mostly our reflection. So for some people, it could be true that there's an entity in the mirror and it's trying to copy us. But I feel that it depends on the mirror too. There are different types of mirrors out there. If you go into a store and you look at, like, especially a store that has a lot of mirrors, you have a mirror where you look thicker or thinner the further apart you. So there are different types of mirrors, and you see that in amusement parks too, when there's like, oh, this is a different mirror than that, right? Mirrors, there are mirrors that reflect the real image back, and there are mirrors that don't. So what we're seeing, it could possibly be that what we're seeing outside of ourselves, like the world and the stars, is also just a reflection. And so we're being trapped in this mirror world. It's not a true world. It's just one mirror or reflection after another. Kind of like I was saying, the sun's being reflected back onto us, you know, from all these different mirrors around us. Similar, it could be that the stars are just a mirror somehow too. I kind of got, maybe there are 4 possibilities to the mirror thing, that the entire world and script that we're seeing is a mirror propped up against us, or there are 4 different types of mirrors. So maybe holding on to your energy. We got the master artisan card, so I'm just reading the notes here. Maybe we are creating our reflection somehow. When we think we're ugly, we see us as ugly. When we see us as beautiful, or we regard us as beautiful, we see us as a beautiful person looking back onto us, finding deep wisdom within. But also maybe the mirror acts as a portal. So I know that for sure. I turn the mirror around when I sleep, and also when I do sessions, by the way, because I always feel that's how they can get through. By they, I mean like entities, matrix controllers, that's how they can get through. They can get through your cell phone somehow, with the watchers, that type of energy. But they can also kind of come through when you're sleeping, through your mirror, or even when you're awake. There's a park here in New York City, and a few summers back in 2018, actually, they had mirrors all over that park. It was part of a art installation. And basically, some were saying, this is the portal to the fairy kingdom. This is the portal to this and that time, you know? And that kind of got me thinking back then already. Maybe more people know that mirrors can act as portals, and they're just kind of putting it up at this art installation when it's really not just art, it's kind of reality. So mirror could be a portal to the astral, possibly a portal to the Akashic records or library too. Maybe reflecting back a lot of our past lives onto us. Whatever you want to see in a mirror is what the mirror will give back to you. When people are on psychedelics, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, because I've hung out in a lot of retreats where people were taking substances. People are particularly fascinated with mirrors. I went to this retreat back in 2018. It was in upstate New York. And people were basically for 3 or 4 days straight. A lot of them were taking random stuff. And it was all about them creating art under the influence of substances too. Some of the art was brilliant, by the way, which I think when you are entering this different space, you can create amazing art because you're leaving all your expectations somewhere else. But when we went to that retreat, and it's not like you had to take substances. Some people were, though, at least half of them were. There were mirrors all around this retreat. It was another part of like this artistic environment we were in, and people were in front of them all the time. So there must be something that people see in mirrors when they're under that influence. There are different types of mirrors. Maybe a mirror can be healing or danger. Mirrors are taking on energies of others. Could also be a portal to the hell realm, some of these mirrors. So like I said, I turn my mirror around during sessions and when sleeping, because I always feel I'm being watched through the mirror somehow. And the same goes through the laptop and phone screens, which are black mirrors in that sense. I felt there was more on mirrors. Let me scroll down here. Like a few months later, I felt there was a bit more on the entire mirror thing. Okay, so I found it. So this is like 2 weeks later. Are mirrors used to trick us that the area we are in is larger? So basically, if we are in this artificially created area, are they putting mirrors all around us, like the moon being a mirror? And I did get, there are 4 mirrors around us somehow. This is a material plane. And mirrors also have to do with vanity. Maybe there are these different pages, page meaning a person, like a knight, a page, all of that, holding up the mirrors somehow. So these different entities are mirrors tricking us in space. It felt like it, that the space we're in is larger. So there's journey, healing mirror, mirror journey, traveling with mirrors, a traveling mirror. Kind of got at the end of it, it was like, oh, maybe there's a traveling mirror. They take the mirror and place it from one spot to another. Also, maybe it was created by queen and kings, basically the gods. Mirrors diversify somehow. So in a way, it's a never-ending story. Maybe the mirrors also affect weather. The area we are in is not as big as they want us to believe, similar to, you know, there not being as many people here as they want us to believe. Like here in New York, I keep running into the same people over and over again. You know, this is supposedly the biggest city here in the US, 8 million people or more. But ironically, I run into the same people over and over again. I'm like, there's no way there are so many people here in this city. Maybe there are, but a lot of them could be background characters where I'm just like, fishy because I keep running into the same people and the city is quite large. So it's similar to mirrors. I also want to say if your mirror kind of like shambles into the ground or whatever, it kind of breaks. I don't really believe in the 7 years of bad luck thing. I'm sure it comes from somewhere. I'm sure that entire belief system comes from like some ancestral belief or whatever. But to me, when a mirror breaks, what it really means is a few different things. First of all, anytime anything breaks, you know, like something like a pot or whatever breaking, I also see that just as things breaking apart. And when a mirror breaks, that's a reflection breaking apart. So either for whoever the mirror broke, they don't like their reflection, or also their relationships are breaking apart, like intimate relationships, family relationships. And it's just like another sign you're getting by spirit somehow. So I really do think, I'm trying to wonder if I ever had a mirror break. I felt I had a mirror break when I was like a younger person somehow, when I was moving, and it kind of broke in shambles, but I can't really remember like in the past 10, 15 years, a mirror really breaking. I do think that it's a huge sign, just like anything really breaking or things falling to the ground off the walls too. That's always a sign too. Anyhow, we're going to move on to anchors. When one person passes on first, will they be anchors to another person? So people dying shortly after one another, are they anchors to each other? I'm sure we've heard of those stories where someone dies, like an old couple or whatever, and then 2 months later, the spouse dies as well. Are some people anchors to one another? Not everyone will be an anchor for one another. So not everyone's going to be an anchor, but these strong soulmate connections can certainly be anchors to each other. Maybe they balance each other out in the transformation that occurs after passing away too. So the anchor is a spiritual concept, but not for soulless people, not for the soulless bodies. Also, someone is going to fight a lonely fight for a while, but then have the same mindset. So it has to do with healing the heart. Maybe being an anchor can be healing to the heart because of being reunited soon after. Also, maybe some people won't understand this concept and someone thinks they may be running out of time too. It seems you have to put the ego aside for this concept. Maybe time is irrelevant. One person can be an anchor for years and years, even if the other person remarries and finds someone else. And we're never running out of time somehow because they're messing with our time. We're in control of time. But some people could be anchors to one another, just not everyone. So it's kind of like if you resonate with the concept of being an anchor, like, you found your one person, whatever, and your anchors, let's just say you have a huge age gap of like 20, 30 years or whatever. Okay, that one person passes on. Does that mean you're going to pass on soon after? I don't think so. I think you can definitely continue with your life, especially if you're the younger person or whatever, or even if two people were the same age, one just kind of passes away at 30 years or whatever due to an accident. There's so many variations of this. I don't think being an anchor to each other necessarily means, oh, one person passes on, you're going to pass on shortly too. But for some anchors, it happens. So some people are going to wait for each other on the other side. And because time is this concept that doesn't really apply, this could be decades until the other person joins, right? And so there's really no time in the astral in that sense, if that makes sense. But yeah, I do think there are anchors to each other. And so the more these there are these anchors that find to each other and that become conscious of having that power somehow, together, the more they could probably, so let's just say both have passed on and are now on the other side. Maybe together you can really digest more through these things, like kind of even make it out of the matrix together, because you're always going to be stronger together than as a single soul, right? Like, so even with a team of souls on the other side, you'd have a higher chance of exiting this entire matrix than maybe as a person alone. So another question, does everyone have a soul? People who are knights and kings, so key players, yes. I kind of saw that as a key player card. Key players, yes, but they're being caught up somehow. Maybe these clones are making people feel backed up in a corner and also messing with key players' creativity. When people have a soul, they are being tormented and backed into a corner by all these attacks. And these attacks are also going to go through like these clones, these soulless entities. Whereas the soulless beings may have more of a better life in that sense because they're not going to be targeted as much. They're not going to be backed up in a corner. They might have one of those picture perfect lives that you hear about online. Not all of them, though. I feel a lot of these soulless beings also have hardships and hard lives because AI doesn't really care. AI wants us all poor, homeless, like kind of like as slaves. And so I feel a lot of these clones are going to have hardships too, which makes it even more confusing to kind of differentiate between who's a clone, who's not a clone, right? Because then you always think, oh, but we're all having hardships. And yeah, might deserve another video. So I don't think everyone has a soul, in short. I think there were definitely key players, and then we're surrounded by these soulless entities. And keep in mind, like I already said in a different video, a lot of these key players created the clones in Atlantis too to keep them company, right? So that they're not all alone, because we're all spread out wherever we are, and we haven't really found each other 100% yet. And there's a lot of ego that goes into being a key player too. I want to emphasize that as well. You know, a lot of these key players ended up being the gods or the kings or whatever. There's a lot of ego that's being transferred from one lifetime to another. And so it might be good just to be surrounded by clones who are always seeing you as great and this and that, who are liking your pictures, but never questioning your life, as opposed to being confronted by another soul. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. Okay, here's a question about death. Is there divine intervention before dying? And this is when you have an accident and people pass on, people don't pass on. So do we have divine protection that will keep us here? Now, this is an iffy one, and it might trigger people. The stronger your will is to live, the more we will have that type of divine protection, divine intervention. But this is still a chess game of other key players determining when they want you gone. There are still so many possibilities that you can turn things around, and somehow, depending on what position you're in, the chess game of life is unknown. We don't get our death date. They will throw a whole lot of mental distractions at us on a mental level. For example, feeling backed in a corner, where we will ask ourselves if we still want to be here. That's kind of the suicide program that I talk about in one of those videos. And think maybe it's easier to just leave. You know, for example, after an illness, we're like bedridden, we've had cancer, we've had this, we'd had that. And we're like, oh, I don't want to fight anymore. I just want to leave. So they're going to throw all of those at us because the entities want you gone. And you're going to need a lot of willpower to stand against that and persist. But the more you are aware of it, the more you're aware of your own divine power, the more you will be able to stand against it and say, no, it's not yet my time to go. And you won't be able to kill me off. There's grief and tears, and it causes pain for people in your life too when you're gone, for example, through suicide. So with the divine intervention, I also keep feeling, because I myself have been in that situation where I've had accidents in my life. I've seen a person almost get run over by a car, and I literally saw this hands reaching out and taking them, you know, like kind of like pulling them away. And so I know there are things like guardian angels, call them whatever, guardian protections around us that are able to protect us. Not necessarily spirit guides or whatever, but there are these benevolent beings somehow. Do you have to call upon them, pray to them, give your power away to them? I don't think so. And I think a lot of these, especially with my one friend where it happened, you know, he almost got run over by this truck and then somehow not. For him, I felt it was always like his deceased grandmother that was kind of around him. I feel that's what I'm saying. Some souls wait on the other side until the entire bloodline has crossed over. So for him, I felt his grandmother was still kind of around protecting him somehow, as crazy as it may seem for people who don't believe that. But I know there's some divine protection we have. And so for people who have these freak accidents or real accidents and they just pass on, and people around them are so shocked and they're like, was it really your time to go? I feel there's a mix going on with them also not wanting to be here. You know, I know that personally because I've had relatives who were in a coma for a year and they passed on recently, like over the past year or so. And as hard as it is to accept, I personally know intuitively that person didn't want to be here anymore. Even the years before they had that accident that put them in a coma, they didn't want to be here anymore. Energetically, I could feel it when I look at their picture, conversations I had. I know they didn't want to be here for a very long time. Something was causing them a lot of pain and grief, and this was just one of those exit points they decided to take. So the more you become aware of what you're up against, you know, a lot of these entities just want you gone. They don't want you here because being here, being a key player here is so precious and so needed right now. And if you really are able to change a lot of people's things around, you know, really like switch them on somehow, make them thinking, get them out of all these new age religious trap programs, they don't want you here. They're going to throw everything at you, the suicide thoughts, all of that. So the more you become aware of that, the more you're going to be able to stand up against it and say, no, it's not my time to go. And you won't be able to do that to me. You won't be able to kill me off. But for some people, you know, some people are strong, some people aren't strong. It's just a fact. I think the last 3 years really brought about who's a fighter, who's not a fighter. And I feel people who don't want to be here, they won't be here, as hard as it sounds. But there are a lot of factors that play into that. And I know it can be triggering for some people. So moving on to the mud floods. Were the mud floods triggered intentionally by a frequency? It kind of felt, so first of all, it felt there were a few mud floods around. One felt like it was triggered by someone in power. Like we got the Emperor card. Maybe even some were triggered by a Roman emperor somehow. This is around the Roman times, which that kind of came to an end when around the year 1000 or so, I'm not sure. Some also felt like they were triggered by a heartbreak frequency, but whatever triggered them is deception. Also, maybe Mother Earth needed a reset. So it felt like some were triggered by a fire or a volcano. Go to Iceland, Hawaii, Guatemala, where you have a lot of these volcanoes. And intentionally, possibly by a gathering, you know, domino starts falling and things fall down. Something was missing that kept it all. So kind of similar to when you stack a lot of dominoes and you kind of like one falls, the entire thing falls. But when there's a piece missing in between, you know, the chain is broken. So something was missing that kept it all in place. And then the mud floods happened. And we need to gather more information on it. For another one, I got maybe through a woman's temperament or a person's temperament, one of those mud floods was triggered, or just the nature thing. Maybe two kings triggered them too. So there seems to be more than one reason. Reincarnation, renewal, awakening, emotions, head. Yeah, we got a lot on that. That didn't really make sense 100% yet. Okay, here's one that could be of interest to some people. Was Joshua or Jesus energetically a Jew? Yes and no. No, he wasn't. Maybe that's why he founded his new religion as well. He was burdened by Judaism somehow. He was holding up a new spiritual concept. And Mary Magdalene, who was his wife, was on the same page. They had the same mindset. Maybe as a younger person, he was more of a Jew energetically, but at the end, not so much. Judaism appears to be a karmic thing he was acting out. Karma just meaning something from previous lifetimes, because he could have been Jewish in a lot of other lives, or he could have been on the other side, like a Roman person. There was chaos in receiving messages, and maybe that's how he felt. So there was chaos in receiving the messages of Judaism. You know, it's kind of like he wasn't really resonating with those messages. You know, it wasn't really resonating with the religion. Maybe that's also how he felt. He needed to found the new religion. Something with the garden where he had the huge spiritual experience before crucifixion, that could have played a role too. But Mary Magdalene and him were in this together somehow. And also something with their children. So they had children together. It could also be that as a child, he was in this childlike spirit, discovering new things. And that's how Christianity came about. I kind of just felt it was like a life mission to him somehow. Keeping secrets of earth. He was always on a vision quest. He was having this life purpose he was acting on. And whatever came about, Christianity, whatever you want to call it, we all know Christianity has been hijacked by the Catholic Church and all of that. But whatever came about, like right after, that was like the purest form of it. And he was acting out on a life purpose, which he most likely had in other lifetimes before too. But that was that one lifetime where it really came into action. And so I asked, was Mary Magdalene energetically a Jew? Yes. So we got the star card, which is a highly spiritual card. Could also be that she was an Aquarius. We're not really getting the dates. But I don't think so. You know, some people are saying, oh, she was a Cancer, she was an Aquarius. Like with all these birth dates, the calendars were very different back then anyhow. so it's a bit hard to pinpoint it. We did get a date for Jesus, and I might have to air the entire Jesus videos again, which were made approximately a year ago. Easter's coming up, so I might do it around then. I might do it earlier, but we did get a very specific date for him. I'm sure there's a specific date for her too. A lot of these lifetimes tend to merge into one when tapping into her, so we have different birthday dates. She did have a material fulfillment, but was looking forward to building up a new spiritual future. We had the celebration card, leaving the past behind. Unlimited potential too. So religion was more of a culture anyhow. You know, Judaism is more, a lot of Jewish people tell me, because you have a lot of Jewish people here in New York, believe it or not, Judaism, and I know for a lot of small-minded people who always comment on my BitChute and some YouTube videos, they're like, oh yeah, you're a Zionist, you're a Jew, you're this and that. You have no idea what you're talking about, you know, like that's all I have to say to those people. New York has a crazy amount of Jewish people. That might not be the case for other areas in the US. I think you also have that in LA. You certainly don't have that to the same extent in Germany, which is, I think, common knowledge at this point. But, you know, Judaism is more of a culture. It's not necessarily a religion. When you grow up Jewish, from my understanding, what I've observed is it's just not like Christianity or, yeah, Islam even. So religion was more of a culture in that sense. And it wasn't like, you know, switching to something. It was just kind of, it was a spiritual journey. But also somehow a treasure got lost in this entire mix. And that's kind of where I felt the Holy Grail was coming into. And is the Holy Grail really the bloodline of both Yeshua and Mary Magdalene? And how is it really related to all of these spiritual concepts? Okay, I think we're going to leave it at that for this video. Thank you so much for tuning in, and see you in the next video. Bye, guys.